Welcome to Supply Circles, stories from the innovators, disruptors and improvers in supply chain management today, brought to you by AI Group.
Hello, I'm James Scotland, coming to you today, as always, from the Yungandah language region in Service Paradise, Queensland. And this is Supply Circles, the podcast that asks the question, how can we in Australia create supply chains that are resilient and sustainable at a time when we're implementing the challenges of the 3Ds? You know them: digitalisation to keep up with your peers and your industries, decarbonisation to meet your local requirements and targets by 2050 and in some states 2045, and ongoing disruptions, which come in many shapes, not only pandemics, but also industry disruptions, product disruptions, logistics interruptions and challenges, global inflation, and many more. Each fortnight I delve into different sections of the end-to-end supply chain. I chat with fascinating and interesting people, and we try to have some fun along the way. Today I'm going to talk about an important emerging issue in supply chain management and business sustainability, a concept called product stewardship. Obviously, the centerpiece of almost all supply chains is a good product. But what actually constitutes a good product is a complex question. There's lots of aspects to it, several surprising aspects. And, I want to uncover all of them today if we can. Product stewardship is a business management concept that is not overly well known, but needs to be. So what is it? One definition says product stewardship provides an opportunity for business to do more, strive for more, and achieve more with its products and its processes. Product stewardship aims to drive environmentally beneficial outcomes through good design and clean manufacturing. It promotes the use of components and materials that are easier to recover, reuse, and recycle. Essentially, product stewardship is about designing products that benefit the end consumer, your end-to-end supply chain, the environment, and the community. Everyone wins. Simply put, it's a way of creating sustainable and resilient supply chains, simply by designing better products. At least that's the way that I understand it. That's my interpretation. But let's find out. Let's find out by asking my guest today, who is John Gatsakis. John is a respected and trusted industry advisor, consultant, and advocate who is wholeheartedly dedicated to promoting and fostering the principles of good and responsible design. He is the director of the esteemed Australian Product Stewardship Centre of Excellence. He is an adjunct professor with the Institute of Sustainable Futures at the University of Technology, Sydney, and he is the co-founder of the renowned E-Waste Watch Institute. John is also a member of the advisory group on the circular economy for Federal Minister Plibersek. So all things considered, he is the perfect person to ask about sustainable product design and product stewardship. So let's ask him. Hello, John. Welcome to the show. It's a real privilege to have you on Supply Circles.
Hello, James. It's great to be here, although I do worry that I think I'm wearing too many hats, given your introduction there.
Oh, you're just one of those overachievers. Overachievers. Where are you coming from? You're in Victoria, I think, chilly Victoria?
I live in northeast Victoria, in the heart of the Victorian Alps, basically at the feet of Mount Hotham and Mount Feathertop. It's the perfect place if you're a keen backcountry skier, a bushwalker, a deer hunter, a fly fisher. Living adjacent to the Victorian Alpine National Park is pretty special, I must say.
I have a problem with that area because I can never fully decide whether it's best to be there in summer or winter. I go there in summer and say, this is the perfect time to be here. And then I go back in winter and say, oh, no, this is the perfect time to be here.
Yeah.
How long have you been there?
Have been built a house about 6 years ago, but have been visiting for the last 30 years. I'm a keen cross-country skier and bushwalker and motorbike rider. So for me, it's been a really lovely destination over a long time. I think it began with my year 11 geography camp at Mount Hotham, and have always been a fan of northeast Victoria. It's a great region.
There's a bit of Bear Grylls in there.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, James. I wouldn't go that far, although our region does have plenty of such characters. But no, I still love the city. So it's a nice mix between my professional work in Melbourne and Sydney and Canberra, etc., as well as then having northeast Northeast Victoria is my base.
It sounds like a great setup. You're the guy that hangs with Bear Grylls. Yeah. So John, I gave my stumbling view of product stewardship. It's not really a term that you hear all that often. Can you frame it in a way that makes sense for our business listeners?
Sure. Look, and definitions can vary. The reality, James, is that product stewardship is not a new term in some industries. It's been around for 20, 30, 40 years in the chemicals industry, those producing herbicides, insecticides, chemicals, etc. So a long history then. It's migrated over the years into other industries, electronics, carpet, vehicles, batteries, clothing, etc. But in simple terms, the definition you gave earlier is accurate, but in really simple terms, it's about brands and manufacturers owning the product life cycle to reduce the environmental and human health impacts of those products. It's about taking responsibility for those products placed on the market across the life cycle, across the supply chain.
With the argument being that if you take responsibility for the whole life cycle, it's actually better for your business and better for your brand.
Absolutely. It's very much a case of going beyond compliance, so addressing those environmental performance issues in a product, but a wonderful opportunity in terms of meeting growing consumer expectations, differentiating a company, a brand in the marketplace. So there is, and that's the growing acknowledgement really here, is that this is more than compliance. It is about meeting what the market wants and needs in particular product sectors, especially. So it is very much a sensible and prudent business decision these days, not just compliance.
Let's come back to that. Well, you're the Centre Director of the Centre of Excellence for Product Stewardship. Is that your day job? Is that your main job? And what does John do?
It is. It's look. There are. We have 5 directors at the centre, and they represent the consortium that we're made up of. And that consortium is UTS, Institute for Sustainable Futures, AI Group, and Dentsu Creative, which is a global communications and strategy firm. So it is very much my day job. Sometimes it's my night job, and occasionally it's my weekend job, given the current demand for product stewardship, James. But we exist to accelerate the uptake of product stewardship across industry, across different product types, through mentoring, education, applied research, advisory. We also provide direct input and advice and share our views with the Australian Government and the Environment Department on product stewardship priorities, issues and opportunities. We're basically here to support and enable businesses to be better product stewards.
You said, given the current demand for product stewardship, does that mean more and more Australian companies are trying to understand how to build better products using the broad concept of better?
That's a big that's a big yes, James. The demand for knowing more about product stewardship, trying to understand what it is, and really drilling down. What does it mean for a particular business or association or product sector? It can mean different things with different priorities, whether you're working in end-of-life passenger vehicles versus clothing versus sporting footwear versus plastics used in agriculture. So the demand is high. It's growing. Government is has invested in some sectors. We're seeing more regulatory intervention, which in itself stimulates demand for advice and information and guidance. So Australia is really at the front end of a sort of watershed around demand for product stewardship and doing it better. And that's informed by a range of issues. Climate change, waste, unsafe chemicals, and growing consumer expectation and demand.
So is this being driven by government regulations, or is this more by just the marketplace?
It's a combination. In certain product areas, it's very much government now looking at regulatory intervention. For example, photovoltaic systems, solar panels. They've been on the Environment Minister's list since 2016 with not much action nationally. So now the Australian government is moving on a process to look at developing regulation in that space, as well as small electrical and electronic equipment to go beyond where the current regulated scheme of TVs and computers is, to move to smaller products. And a lot of this is really catch up with what's happening, for example, in the EU and other OECD countries. In other areas, there is growing consumer interest, demand, expectation, and we're seeing a lot of this around packaging and how plastics are used in packaging. We're seeing it in relation to batteries and the importance of consumers wanting to dispose of their batteries responsibly, given some of the other impacts associated with those in terms of fires in factories, in waste management facilities, in trucks, etc. Clothing is another area where we're seeing growing consumer interest and demand for attention to waste avoidance and making sure that apparel isn't adding to our sort of waste crisis and unnecessary disposal to landfill. So a mix of different drivers and responses, James, depending on the particular product category.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of pressure from councils, but also from the federal government. So, and then the marketplace is having its say in what they want from products. Mm. What has the Centre of Excellence achieved over the last few years? What are you most proud of?
Look, we've been going now for about 2.5 years, and we're working across a range of different activities. Our achievements in some respects, our success is the success of industry and business doing more product stewardship. So, you could argue that we're bringing product stewardship to key decision makers. We're bringing it to the boardroom. We're bringing it to country managers and senior managers, as well as all of those that are working day to day on environmental management, corporate responsibility, etc. So we've been directly involved in advising emerging schemes covering passenger vehicles, existing schemes related to tyre stewardship, solar panels, clothing with the Australian Fashion Council, sports footwear with the Australian Sporting Goods Association, resilient flooring, mattresses, medical products, plastics used in agriculture. So we're, for us in terms of achievement, it's our contribution to support, mentor, guide, assist, be a sounding board for a range of these industries.
Just to make it aware that product stewardship is about making better products across the board, not just a product itself, but the whole concept of the product is better, taking in all factors. I assume that it's part of the ESG question.
It is. It is in part. It is around system-wide thinking. It's really about how looking across the life cycle from design and production through to manufacturing, distribution, logistics, the use phase, the post-consumption, post-use phase. What are the options for refurbishment, remanufacturing, repair, recycling when it reaches the very end of life? So it is very much a more holistic view rather than where we've been in previous decades of environmental management at end of life and really dealing with problems once they've arrived. Product stewardship and the role of design in product stewardship is really a much more preventative strategy. How do we get in early? How do we design out waste and pollution? How do we design out unsafe chemicals? How do we design out a whole range of issues that cause environmental problems either for the user or downstream at end of life?
Yeah, that seems to, I think that nails it for me. That really resonated, that this is a preventative strategy. This is saying, let's get ahead of our markets and our regulations and our business costs and the waste. All of that we can address by looking at it proactively. And I think that seems to be what product stewardship fundamentally is, this get ahead.
It is. And look, there's, our experience tells us, the literature tells us that up to 80% of a product's environmental impact is determined at the design stage. So how obvious is that in terms of where you need to make some different types of decisions when developing a new product, redesigning an existing product, etc. But key to product stewardship is accountability and responsibility. So who are those that are playing? And this is many of the AI group members who are doing wonderful work in this space. But it is around starting to allocate responsibility more clearly, more specifically, around who has influence to design a better product, manufacture a cleaner product, look at the refurbishment stage, etc. Use reverse logistics in a smart way. So a great opportunity here for businesses to address those issues as a preventative strategy, because the strategies to date, James, we need to be frank here, the strategies to date haven't delivered all of the benefits and impact reductions that we need to see, whether you're talking about climate change, waste generation, chemicals, resource depletion, known stocks of copper and other critical minerals. We really do have to think very differently about products, how we develop them, the ecosystem within which they sit.
I was going to ask you this later, but now's a good time considering what you just said. One of the challenges for a business is the way that the balance sheet is set up. So, I come from the old days where you would, buy something, you'd capex it over 5 to 10 years. By then it's worth nothing on your balance sheet. So eventually you throw it away. Just throw it away. There would be furniture, there would be machines, all sorts of stuff. Just get rid of it. It's not worth anything to us. Sometimes people say, well, sell it, and you go, maybe, but just look, it's not worth anything. Just throw it out. The balance sheet was the problem. Is that still a problem?
Look, I believe in certain product categories, certain industries, it is, because what it requires us to do, if we're taking ESG seriously, if we're taking circular economy seriously, product stewardship seriously, is we need to think about this as a cost of doing business, and therefore a different approach to how we account for these things. And it's not always just an environmental thing. This is, you could argue that the tax system doesn't necessarily lend itself sometimes to how to better depreciate products over their life, and therefore maximize the benefits of leasing a product rather than owning a product. So it is about a different mindset, James. And this is now the cost of doing business. And some companies do that exceptionally well. Others struggle for a whole lot of reasons. SMEs, I have great sympathy for, in terms of, they're not global brands able to bring in a head of sustainability and do X, Y, Z. So it is a challenge, but it does need this sort of system redesign approach, a new way of thinking. Otherwise, we're just going to be chasing ambulances with putting out spot fires in this whole space.
Yeah, and of course brings in typical bottom line or multiple bottom lines where you see the business as a holistic system rather than just an accounting process. How did you end up at the Centre of Excellence? Now, you're an adjunct professor, so I accused you of being an academic, and you said, I'm not an academic, but you did spend time in the uni system, didn't you?
I did. Look, it's, being pigeonholed is a bit of a dangerous thing, and I have great respect for my scholarly colleagues and researchers. I spent 10 years.
You can knock them if you want to. They're not listening.
They're good folk. But I spent 10 years at RMIT at a wonderful organisation called the Centre for Design at RMIT in Melbourne. It was headed up by a fellow called Professor Chris Ryan. He identified that design has a key role to play in delivering a sustainable future, no matter what the discipline: architecture, landscape, interior, product, textiles, graphic, digital, etc. So he was also one of my early lecturers when I was a young bloke, before I had all the silver and grey hair that I've got. So I went back to work for him. But a lot of our work there was applied research. So we didn't do any teaching. We basically worked collaboratively with companies like Cambrook back then, Email Appliances, Westinghouse, Simpson, who are now part of the whole Electrolux group. We worked with Chevello Commercial Interiors, Blackmores on packaging, and a lot of it was about introducing design, life cycle thinking, and product stewardship, even back then, to these Australian companies and brands. So that was where, that's the genesis, I suppose, of my interest in the importance of design and product stewardship in better managing environmental and human health impacts in products. And after I left RMIT, really since then, I've spent the rest of my days working directly with companies, with industry associations, working on stewardship. Spent many years as a sustainability advisor to the Consumer Electronic Suppliers Association in the development of the Product Stewardship Act. So a lot of my work straddles, is building bridges between policy, practice, operations, but also where there's great research being done, and with my university colleagues at UTS on the benefits and effectiveness of product stewardship in Australia. How do we use that knowledge, that data, to improve existing schemes, design new schemes? So that's the genesis, is my days at RMIT, and really I haven't veered too much apart from working for different organisations in that same space.
What did you learn? I mean, you mentioned a few things there that you've learned, but what did you learn fundamentally? That design has been wrong for many years, or the concept of design is still right, we just need to expand it? Just talk about your learnings from your research days.
Yeah, look, look, there are a couple of things. One, that this whole idea of the importance and potential potency of good design in solving these problems. The other one is
potency of good design. I love that.
Look, it's relevant. If done well, it's absolutely potent. The other part is a very strong life cycle thinking approach. We can't just think of end of life and, the solution to pollution is dilution. We've got to think about all of those decisions across the life cycle, across the supply chain. So that whole area of life cycle thinking, which and has sort of articulates into life cycle assessment and making more, quantitative decisions about impacts and issues and priorities. So that was also another key learning. The other area for me was really around the role of policy and what I call intelligent or proportionate regulation in helping to stimulate better design, stimulate better environmental outcomes, and therefore a lot of work looking at what had been happening in the EU with their various directives and other programs, and in the Nordic countries, and spent time in the Netherlands and Germany visiting companies like BMW and Bosch, Philips in Eindhoven, to see how those companies were doing it, but also to understand the link between how they were responding to government policy and government regulation as a driver, as a catalyst for environmentally improved products, reduced impacts. Sometimes successful, sometimes not. So there's some of the key learnings from me, from my research days, was the importance of design, preventative strategies, life cycle thinking, but the use of intelligent regulation, not using mandatory interventions willy-nilly, but where there are identified issues and impacts there, and industry isn't responding, then government needs to step in and look at those market failures. So a variety of learnings depending on the product sector too, James.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this, didn't we, with the hole in the ozone layer when they said you just need to manufacture out CFCs. Is that what happened? I think
that's part of it. I think that's an example of where you have a global treaty, a global convention that the world agrees to, and then with those global treaties and conventions, if you sign up to them, if you help develop them as a jurisdiction, as a country, as a nation, you're obliged to respond with local initiatives and solutions and responses, be they funding, investment, local legislation within your country. So that is a good example. And we're seeing that right now, James.
But the point was that they were able to do it. They were able to figure out how to make a product without the assumed fundamental.
That's right. And this is where industry rises to the challenge in terms of its own R&D and its innovations and finding substitutes in terms of those ozone-depleting substances. So, great work by industry, but this is where there needs to be a selective approach to where government intervenes and where it doesn't. Often in some areas, industry-led work that is voluntary is the way to go. In other areas where the chain is being dragged, you look at other options, and sometimes the other options aren't regulation. They might be smarter procurement. How do we use procurement to drive the process that levels the playing field, that lets the dollar talk? So there are a variety of responses here. We don't want to get too simplistic or ideological about voluntary versus regulatory, because there are other innovations.
Yeah, we'll come back to systems thinking before, because later on, after the break, because that's about this whole idea of think of it as a whole system, not just as
Correct.
a product. Let's talk about that after the break. We've discussed on this program before the concept of inbuilt obsolescence, which back in my day was, you'd build a thing to break down so that you have to buy a new one and throw it away. But these days it's not so much breakdown. I've got a iPhone 14 Pro, which of course I had to buy because it's much better than the 12, which is better than the 10, which is better than the 8, which is, and so I keep upgrading because it's better. So we've got this marketing approach of new is better, just keep changing all the time, keep consuming. Is that the enemy of product stewardship?
It's not inherently the enemy of it. It really is an issue, though, that's significant in terms of not prolonging the life of products, not looking at how we can keep products longer. And this is where I don't like to generalize, but there is some value here in thinking about what do we need to do to keep products going longer, especially given that unnecessary generation of waste, single-use products, electronics that have consumables, these are all contributing to the waste challenge. So how do we design products so that they we can extend their product life? We make sure that software doesn't bloat them and render them useless, that they can be repaired in a safe and affordable way, etc. But obsolescence is an important area that needs to be addressed, in terms of how it contributes to overproduction and overconsumption. And so it is an area where we need to do more, and we're seeing this now with various activities and programs in the EU with their sustainable design rules that are being proposed. We're seeing the French government and now the rest of the EU likely to follow around durability ratings and repairability ratings. The Productivity Commission here in Australia recommended that a consumer labelling program be set up to look at repairability and inform consumers more. So these are areas that are both an opportunity, but sometimes, understandably, for some brands and producers, seen as a threat. The French index on repairability, several manufacturers have risen to the challenge and really gone for it in terms of trying to get the best rating by redesigning their products. But we've got to look more closely at avoiding the design and production of short-life products, products where batteries are embedded and cause all sorts of other problems. But part of it is the market is saying, we still want reliable, affordable products, but we want products that last longer, can be refurbished or repaired or upgraded. So I think there are opportunities here. I think it requires a particular mindset from key players in terms of, is this a threat or is this an opportunity? And we're seeing, again, some of the big brands out of Europe looking at these questions of durability, repairability, obsolescence, being able to upgrade. Don't buy a product, lease it. You can now buy, lease and headphones in the Netherlands. You have them for life. They repair them for life. They replace parts. You can self-repair, etc. So, but it needs to be approached product class by product class. You've got to be careful about generalising about, the right to repair being, how it's applied across different areas. It's different for toasters as it would be for furniture, as it would be for IT versus smartphones, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, you see people, I don't understand this, but you see people lining up outside the Apple store waiting for their latest Apple phone, or outside the Samsung store or whatever to get the very latest. I don't get there. I'm second into the future, not first. But it does indicate that there is a market for, I need new and better and sparkly and nice and whatever. And marketers will respond to that. No, I'm a marketer. That's what you respond to, the psychology of purchase. Will we see a change over time?
Yes and no, James. Markets don't just emerge in isolation. Marketing can be a very aggressive sales approach in terms of the comms process and generating that desire. So desire doesn't happen on its own. Desire happens by very expensive television and cinema ads and billboards and product ambassadors. So I think we have to be very honest here about your chicken and egg and what influences what in this space. Yeah. But that whole sales and marketing approach does create this need. You look at companies and pushing the need to upgrade, and sometimes an upgrade can be really useful. Let's be honest here. If we look at all of the things that a smartphone does for us and how reliable they are, and how many hours of the day many of us use them and what they do for us and how faulty or not they are, generally they're an amazing device in terms of reliability and all of the functions and convenience that they bring. And yes, there's a downside, and we have to look at those, and this is where product stewardship plays a role. But I believe that we do need to sort of redefine how we approach the production and consumption of products. Otherwise, we're not going to deal with a range of these issues, whether it's climate change or critical minerals that are needed to be processed to go into new electronics and the electrification process, etc. We just can't keep going the way we've been going if we want to address those problems and really deliver a sustainable future and increasingly a circular economy over time.
If I'd done my research properly, I'd have these figures to hand, but I don't, John. But there's something like, just making up numbers, there's something like 23 grams of critical minerals in the 3 or 4 kilo phone that you have, whatever it is, probably 10 kilo phone. There's only 23 grams, but we've produced something like 6 billion phones. All of a sudden, we've used a lot of critical minerals, and we've got to start looking at that's just stop digging it, basically.
Yeah, and this is where some really interesting stats exist around. It's much more cost effective to recover those precious metals and other materials out of all electronics, and in particular smartphones, but all electronics, because it's cheaper to do that than really mine the various ores in order to extract and process and get those. So the whole area of above ground mining and recovery of these products at end of life to make sure that we don't lose them to landfill, we don't lose them to dumping, etc., that we can reuse them in the production and manufacture of new products. And this is something that's been acknowledged for a long time at a number of levels. The EU has had what they call the Waste Electrical and Electronics Directive and the Restriction of Hazardous Substance Directive for 20 plus years. So it's there's an acknowledgement that we've got to recover these products and get these materials back and use them in manufacturing for new products. But the other really jolting stat is that e-waste. Out of any, and e-waste is basically anything with a plug or a battery, is the fastest growing waste stream in the world. Given our appetite for and hunger of smart home devices, smartphones, laptops, tablets, power tools, cameras, you name it, hobby equipment, whatever, solar panels, inverters, storage, etc. We've really got to get very smart about both product life extension, refurbishment, remanufacturing, and then recovering those materials at end of life. And there are some great examples in Australia and overseas. We need to sort of mainstream it, apply it horizontally, and really deliver some measurable benefit at scale.
Let's take a break. This is a good chat. This is fascinating. When we come back, we'll talk about the systems thinking and also how do those very smart companies do those things. Back in a moment. Let's hear an ad from AI Group.
If you have supply chain or business improvement challenges, contact AI Group's Business Improvement and Growth Hub. The Big Hub is a library of practical and relevant resources designed to assist member businesses to grow and improve. The Big Hub also includes an extensive network of experienced pre-qualified business improvement consultants. For more details, contact big@aigroup.com.au. That's big@aigroup.com.au.
John, before the break, you were talking about some really good companies that have been smart about their design and been able to address some of these whole of system type challenges for their products. Can you give me some examples of what's success?
There are some really good examples, and again, it depends on the product categories you look at. But if you look at floor covering and carpet, modular carpet tiles, you look at what Interface has been doing in Australia and globally, and Shaw contract carpets, these sorts of manufacturers of products. If you look at the ICT space and IT, you look at companies like Hewlett Packard, what they've been doing over many years across their supply chain, with information for consumers, with recycled content in their laptop housings and designed for repairability. You look at companies like Fairphone in the Netherlands and how they're designing smartphones to deal with conflict minerals, but also product life extension, durability, self-repair, these sorts of things. And clearly companies like...
What are they doing? I mean, what does good look like?
Good for them is very much, and the market has spoken in the Netherlands, and now they're selling into the use. But products that last longer, products that you don't have to buy, that you can either you can lease their smartphone or purchase it. You can buy self-repair kits. You need to replace the camera. They give you the guidance on how to replace the camera or any other component in the phone. Conflict materials are not in the phone at all in terms of how they source the materials and minerals that go into that product. So these are recycled content content is part of the list of features too. So there's a variety of different features depending on the product. Commercial furniture is another area, James, and you've got companies here in Australia like Chevello Commercial Interiors that most of us have sat at a workstation or a task chair or in front of a petition that's made by Chevello that has attention to again design for recycling, using low VOC materials in the substrate, in the petitions. Companies like Woven Image in New South Wales making again acoustic panels with recycled PET, and you've got other companies at everyday level. Rip Curl doing interesting things with take back of wetsuits. You've got apparel and clothing companies like Patagonia and North Face. And I don't want to put these up, all of them, as absolutely perfect, but they are good examples of where companies are applying a strong design, sustainable design process, a product stewardship process, thinking about extended producer responsibility, looking at independent certification of their claims to avoid the whole greenwashing debate and make sure that whatever claims they're making about their products are independently assessed and certified and labelled as such. So a variety of activities here from different companies, and I'm sure there are many more there that one could mention, but we need more of it. It needs to become mainstream as opposed to holding up a handful of exemplars.
Yeah, so you're saying a longer product life in itself, in its use life. Try and aim for a longer product life in its use life, and then also make sure that once its use is finished, that there is established and sensible recycling. Is that sort of roughly what you're talking about? And the product design itself is designed using products that are also sensible.
It is. And look, this is where if you look at the principles of circularity, what is a circular economy? Let's look at it that way. The key principle is designing out waste and pollution from the outset. That can be applied to any product. The second principle is prolonging the life of products, their components and the materials, keeping them circulating in the economy, whether it's through reuse, repair, durability, or recycling at end of life. And then the third principle is around how do you deliver a restorative or regenerative approach to that product or the product system. And that's really around how do you develop something in manufacturing that's environmentally positive, that uses renewable materials, that doesn't contain unsafe chemicals. And that's very relevant in, say, agriculture and horticulture and what can happen there. Because what we have to do here, and this is a difference between the circular economy and where we've been the last few decades, is we need to go beyond just less bad. And I think that's what's characterised a lot of product development, a lot of product stewardship, and a lot of environmental management is less harm and less bad is okay. Well, again, the evidence is telling us that that's been inadequate. Not that it's not worth anything, but we've just got to go beyond the constant sort of minor incremental improvements of efficiency, that we have to be environmentally positive and therefore restorative and regenerative. And along the way, underlining all of that is the need to decarbonise.
Yeah, it's like saying you're 300% overweight, and so I've given up cheese. And you say, well, that's good, but that's not what's going to save you.
That's a very good analogy, James. That's a very good analogy, But it is, we have to move into a mode of producing and consuming that builds capital. Not just these little less harm, less bad sort of things. And that's not easy. Don't get me wrong. That is not easy, and it is a challenge. But this is where the right policy settings, government investment, smart companies, good innovation, potent design can start to collectively make a difference.
There is where are we up to with circular economy? Because it comes and goes as a terminology, in the zeitgeist. It's sort of there and then it's not. What's going on?
Circular economy is not new, really. Let's in my view, it's not new. The principles have existed for a long time. Those principles I mentioned earlier are not new. What's new is the new label. And if that new label and the corporatization of that label helps bring around positive change, that's okay. But circularity in isolation of who's responsible, who's accountable, how is it measured, what are the impacts and the benefits, is another term. It's an important term because it flags where we need to be in terms of addressing some of these issues. And there is, the idea of designing out waste from the outset, and again, prolonging the life of materials, keeping them circulating in the economy, is really important. But it is, I've heard some entertaining descriptions of, circular economy, and I tend to agree with it, suffers from a lot of cheerleaders and not enough athletes. James. If we have...
But I don't know if it's well understood, really, like the fundamentals aren't really well understood.
No. And look, it's a matter of who needs to understand them. It's just like, does your everyday consumer need to know what product stewardship is? No. What they need to know is, the features of a product, how durable it is, whether it has any recycled content, that it doesn't contain and then they need to know where can they take it to be recycled or repaired or whatever. They don't need to understand all the jargon associated with it. But circular economy is a very important mindset, and it's something that we need to pursue with vigour, but we need to get very practical about it, and we need to do it rather than talk about it as much. I think there's a lot of loose talk when it comes to circular economy. What we need to see is measurable impact, action, and that's what's really important. And I believe that's where we're heading, is an acknowledgement that it's got to be about impact, not just chitty chats about the next workshop on circularity.
If you look at companies like Patagonia and Rip Curl, too close to my heart outside of work, they have a corporate philosophy that says we're going to be good for the world. And then they build products. I'm putting words in their mouth, but they build products that are circular, that are right from the design to the end life of the wetsuit is all based around this whole idea of product stewardship. If I understand what you're saying, this is what we need from every company. We need a company to start saying, we are going to build our business around sustainability.
Exactly that, James. It is about making these sorts of principles and strategies mainstream and making them universal. So we don't just hold up Patagonia in technical outdoor wear and surfwear. Every outdoor apparel company in that space.
I'm going for a sponsorship here, John.
That's what they're doing. With electronics, we don't just hold up, HP or Apple or Dell or Fuji Xerox, that they are all doing this. And in some sectors, they're more advanced in making it a universal approach. I'd say that in some parts that there is a more universal approach. But what you've described is absolutely essential. It's not about just the exemplars. It's got to be at how these circular economy principles of product stewardship, etc., is applied universally across the board in an industry, in a sector, whether it's domestic furniture, clothing, outdoor gear, end-of-life vehicles, so on and so forth.
We had, I had on, as a guest on this program a few episodes ago, our mutual friend Rachel Wilkinson, who argued well, as she does, that recycling is not just recycling. That and I can't remember it exactly, but if you recycle it from a product A and it becomes still product A, but in a second use, that's good. But you really want to have a bit smarter about, plastic becoming plastic or plastic becoming some other product. Can you explain that a bit more? Do you understand this concept of using recycling, in a multifaceted thought process?
Part of it comes back to the waste management hierarchy, James. And in terms of where the greatest benefit is, it's through waste avoidance.
Is there one? There's a waste management hierarchy.
There is. And people working in this field will know it backwards, should know it backwards. Avoidance and prevention right from the outset, then moving down through to reduce, reuse, repair, and then you get to recycling. Recycling is down in the bottom half of the way. Right, well, it's not the last thing, because you have safe treatment and processing, and then you'll have disposal and landfilling, etc. But it is in the bottom half of the waste hierarchy. Okay. But we still need to do it, because again, you need all of these different solutions to address the issues of using our materials more sustainably, recovering them, reusing them, etc. So what Rachel was saying, if given your description, is valid, that we've got to make sure that what we are recovering goes into upcycled products, that we're not recovering plastics and putting them into downcycling them. There's a limit to how much garden edging the world needs made from downcycled plastic. So, so we've got to think very carefully about how we make good use of this material, which in many applications has wonderful benefits. But what Rachel is saying, if I understand that correctly, is right. We have to think carefully about making sure we keep adding value, that we prolong the life of those materials, that we upcycle them, and that we don't put them into products that in that second life that we lose them forever. I do worry about how some materials...
I think that was her point, actually.
I do worry about some materials being claimed as some major environmental innovation only to be locked in concrete or some other material that may cause some other problem downstream, and we can't recover that material. And it may over time lead to microplastics entering waterways and marine environments. So we do have to think, again, this comes back to a life cycle approach. If we're recycling plastics or any other material into the next product, what are the life cycle benefits of that, or the impacts of that? So we have to get very serious here and rigorous about what the impacts and benefits, the pros and cons are of whether we have a durable product, whether we have a repairable product, a recyclable product. What really is the benefit? Because at the end of the day, a lot of these strategies are about protecting the environment. That's why they're being done, and making them commercially responsible and beneficial is a wonderful thing. But it is very much about environmental protection, environmental quality, and a sustainable future.
What about if I buy some of my material to make my finished product? I buy that from a third world country or another country. How do I try and design that out, or do I try and fix it from the third world country, or just accept it as I can't do much about that?
I don't think it's a matter of accepting it and not doing anything. I think this is where many companies have pretty sophisticated sort of supply chain evaluation methods and checklists to verify, to audit, to ensure that modern slavery is being addressed, etc. Conflict minerals are being addressed. So this is probably starts to head in the direction of some supply chain management experts answering your question in more detail. But there are processes and methods there, and many Australian companies and brands have those methods. They have ethical sourcing managers and professionals and teams that look at all of those issues to make sure that they're not bringing products or materials, or to help ensure that they're not bringing products into the country that are causing environmental or social problems elsewhere around the globe.
Yeah, I've asked this question many times in this podcast, so I'm just putting you under the pump like everyone else gets put under the pump.
Oh, it's a really important question. It's a really important question. We really do have to look at, we might think we have a green product here, but what is the global supply chain that's at play here, and making sure that we address that. And that's what I suppose I'm saying. We need to get rigorous. We don't want just simplistic claims that product X has some recycled content. We all pack up and go home. We do need to understand the origins of materials, where they're made, how they're made, the environmental impacts associated with those. And again, I think this is where certain industries and the IT sector, consumer electronics in many cases, has developed some very, very refined processes to check, assess, evaluate, audit, because they are sourcing materials from multiple jurisdictions, multiple countries. They are manufacturing in certain locations. So, and that's why we have these global treaties, in part on some issues, whether it's the Basel Convention for the transboundary movement of hazardous waste, whether it's the Montreal Protocol, and now we're heading towards one on plastics pollution. That starts to really touch on supply chains and how we can manage them more tightly and in an environmentally beneficial way.
You've explained product stewardship in a very non-academic way, in a very practical business way. Thank you, John. I'm sure there's people listening to this episode and running businesses and thinking, I need to find out about waste hierarchy, I need to find out about recycling, I need to find out about product stewardship, better design. What do they do when they stop listening to this podcast?
They can visit our website. So stewardshipexcellence.com.au, they can have a look at the resources that are there, and they can give us a ring. They can send us an email and they can make contact, and we're more than happy and interested to have a conversation with them and help guide them. If we can help them, we will. If we can't, we'll identify other sources and organisations that can. But we're very interested in particular in talking to companies, to manufacturers here in Australia, the suppliers that are interested in product stewardship, and never to fear whether they're doing it well or not, or they understand it or not. Part of our role here is to educate, to inform, to listen to what their challenges are, rather than simply impose what we think is necessary without really understanding what they need. So our website and direct contact, and we do this day in, day out with various companies around the country. So more than happy to chat to listeners.
We'll put that website in the show notes and your LinkedIn page, I guess.
That'd be great, yes.
And, of course, I encourage people to take the next steps. Just to finish up, here's a funny story. The other day, I live on the beach. The other day, I went down the beach to the local surf club, grabbed a coffee, and was sitting on the beach drinking coffee as the sun came up. And so it was so beautiful, I took a photo and put it on my socials. And my niece, who is a lawyer and mother of two, put a message on my photo saying, "Why are you using a recycled cup?" And it's I saw straight away that I'm sitting somewhere absolutely gloriously natural beauty, and I'm destroying it. We all need to start thinking, don't we?
We do. We can, as the saying goes, we can act locally in a very effective way, and we can make all sorts of decisions. You may make a whole lot of other decisions, James, that are environmentally very positive, that eclipse that one disposable coffee cup. But get yourself a good reusable coffee cup that doesn't look like a sipper cup.
And remember to take it with you. Yes.
Exactly.
Sorry, Deb. I've fixed it. I have fixed it. I promise. All right. Thank you, John. Thanks for sharing with us. It's a wonderful chat. Are you going? We're recording this on a Friday. Are you going up into the high country and going to go hiking or skiing this weekend?
I'm returning to to regional Victoria tomorrow morning and looking forward to that. I had a great time in Melbourne, lots of meetings with various companies and stakeholders. But back to the Alps tomorrow, and hopefully getting a chance to plan some ski tours up onto the big tops around Mount Hotham.
Yeah, get offline and enjoy this
Absolutely.
Wonderful country we live in. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, James.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, that's it for another episode of Supply Circles. We really did talk about sustainability today. I love the conversation. Thanks again to everyone for listening, and thanks for your feedback, which comes in all the time. If you have any feedback on today's interview with John, or ideas for the show, or just want to give me some feedback, hit me up at james.scotland, that's one T, james.scotland@aigroup.com.au, or head over to my LinkedIn page. I'd love to hear from you. And we'll be back in a fortnight with more insights into the keys to building sustainable supply chains. Thanks for joining me. This is Supply Circles. I'm James Scotland. Bye for now.